Hello. I just wanted to share with you the story of Ken Small. Now, history has always been a passion with me, and it crops up when you're not looking for it. That always happens. And I think Ken Small was such a man. He was not an historian. He was not a writer. He was not seeking for any sort of adventure. He was born in Hull, and he had a working class background. His mother was an invalid and he had lots of work to do in the home. He grew up, he wanted to be a policeman. That went very well until he met his wife Anne, and she was a hairdresser. So Anne's business was going very well, and because he didn't play football, that's another story, Ken felt he may not make the progress he wanted in his career as a policeman. He said, well, I could become a hairdresser. So he did. He became a hairdresser. And then he was interested in wigs. So he had a business called Wigwam, which apparently went really, really well. So everything was going very well. One day, one of his managers said to him, oh, let's go for a holiday. Let's go to Exmouth. Let's just go to Devon and explore a bit. So they booked a very short holiday. And one of the trips they made was to Dartmouth. And they went across the water and they went to Slapton Sands. And now I think something just happened to Ken when he was on Slapton Sands. He just was really drawn to the place. He just wanted to be there. And there was a house on the hill, and he shared his enthusiasm with a friend and said, oh, that house, I would just love to live in that house. It was a guest house, and it wasn't doing terribly well. And anyway, that was the holiday, and they went home. And the next day he got a phone call, and somebody said, you know that house you liked, it's up for sale. So Ken said, right. So in more or less the blink of an eye, he made his mind up to buy the house, to sort of take a new turn in life, live by the sea. What could be nicer? Run a guest house. And in 6 months, they'd started the business, which they worked out very hard and enjoyed thoroughly. And Ken thought, this is the ideal life. I've got the sea, I go fishing, I've got the beautiful scenery. What could be better? And he really felt he'd found the perfect life. And then, out of the blue, poor Ken had a breakdown. He never knew how it came about or what happened, but it was a bad one, requiring, serious treatment, shock treatment even. And then he felt he was a different man, and he started to wear black. He was wearing black everywhere he went, but nobody knew why. So a fisherman friend said, oh, why don't you try a bit of beach combing, walking along the beach, and we'll see what we can, it's good for you. So he did. He started walking along Slapton Sands. And again, he didn't know why. But then strange things started to happen. He began to find odd things in the sand which didn't add up. And he heard strange stories about people being sent away from their homes for a military operation 6 months before D-Day, and how the people had just had to leave their homes, but nobody would give specific information. It was all this big secret which no one was talk about. So this went on for a bit, but then he found more and more bits and pieces on the sand, and one day he came across, again it was a military operation, I suppose. They were trying to blow up something in the sand to look for something, and after that he was finding all kinds of shrapnel and relics and buttons and really odd things. He started to collect and make a catalogue of them. And then he heard a story from his friend, fisherman, where he said, oh, we go out about, half a mile out at sea, and their nets were at risk for being torn because there was an object under the sea. So Ken pursued this. He did not give up. I've never known such a man who could really just persist and persist. He wrote letters, no reply. Officialdom, no, nothing. And then he started phone calls. He made all these phone calls. He phoned England, America, everywhere, until he got the truth. And the truth was, just half a mile from his own house on the sea was this tank. So Ken made his mind up. He would get that tank. He would pay for it. He would take responsibility. And it was Ken Small that took responsibility for the truth to be found, the truth to come out, and that the world should know. And soon America was involved, the Pentagon. Anyway, the result was that thanks to Ken Small, there is now a tank on the beach telling the most awful, tragic story of Operation Tiger, which went tragically wrong, resulting in the death of nearly 10,000 poor Americans whose relatives didn't know what had happened to them until Ken Small started to find the truth. And now, of course, there is this connection between America and England, and it was 6 months before D-Day. And although this operation was such a tragedy, if it hadn't happened, D-Day may not have been the success. Well, if it was it was a success, which resulted in the end, we hope, of the war. But no one would have known all the truth, and it was so unfair for the relatives of the dead Americans. And this is the very strange thing, that it wasn't until I got to the end of the book and I looked at a page, relatives and friends, and it makes me feel really emotional, mentioning Evelyn Brannock. She was the instigator of the Kansas City meeting because she had lost her brother, James Cottrell, in the exercise, and Cottrell is my name. So the whole thing is a very strange story to me. I know it's a military operation, and that's how it is remembered now, but Slapton Sands is just an amazing place. And I met the man by sheer accident, and he went on all his life telling his story, selling his book, talking to anybody who wanted to know about Slapton Sands right up until his death, and it was only 2 weeks before his death that his son went down on the beach and said, "Dad, you've got to rest. You've got to come home." And that was this time 80 years ago that Ken gave up his place on the beach. And I think we must remember Ken Small. We must remember the man who didn't rest until this story was told. And that's my tribute to Ken Small. Thank you for listening.